In the silent whispers of the night, I hear the voice of God, and I confess I am humbled. Every beat of my heart is a letter from God, reminding me of His presence. I have walked the path of doubt, only to find God's light guiding my way. In my darkest hour, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I knew it was God's. The beauty of the stars is a reminder of God's infinite creation. Each sunrise is God's way of telling me there is hope for a new day. I have written many words, but none as profound as those spoken by God in my heart. The wind carries God's message of peace and solace to me. In my solitude, I discovered God's companionship is ever present. Every prayer is a letter to God, and every answered prayer is His reply. I have seen miracles in the mundane, and I know they are God's handiwork. God's grace is the ink with which the story of my life is written. The stillness of the morning speaks to me of God's eternal presence. I confess my doubts to God, and He turns them into faith. Nature is God's canvas, and I am but a spectator in His gallery. In the laughter of children, I hear God's joy. I have felt God's love in the kindness of strangers. God's wisdom is the light that guides me through life's uncertainties. Every act of forgiveness is a testament to God's mercy. In moments of despair, God's voice is a beacon of hope. I have seen God's reflection in the eyes of the innocent. The rhythm of the ocean is God's heartbeat, echoing through time. God's truth is a silent confession that speaks louder than words. I find God's presence in the simplicity of a single breath. Every good deed is a letter to God, written with the ink of love. I have stumbled and fallen, only to find God's hand lifting me up. God's patience is infinite, waiting for me to understand His ways. In the silence of the night, God's voice is the loudest. Every act of creation is a whisper of God's imagination. I have sought answers in the world, but found them within God's embrace. God's love is the melody to which my soul dances. In my moments of weakness, I feel God's strength. Every star in the sky is a reminder of God's promise. I have heard God's call in the quiet moments of reflection. God's presence is the thread that weaves the fabric of my existence. I confess my fears to God, and He transforms them into courage. Every sunset is a letter from God, bidding me to rest in His peace. I have seen God's light in the darkest places. God's wisdom is the compass that directs my journey. In the beauty of a flower, I see God's artistry. I have felt God's compassion in the gentle touch of a loved one. God's truth is the foundation upon which I build my life. Every moment of gratitude is a silent thank you to God. I have witnessed God's miracles in the everyday moments. God's love is the anchor that keeps me grounded. In the midst of chaos, I find God's calm. I have heard God's voice in the harmony of nature. God's grace is the bridge that carries me over troubled waters. Every act of kindness is a reflection of God's heart. I confess my doubts to God, and He responds with clarity. God's presence is the air that I breathe. In the laughter of a child, I hear God's joy. I have felt God's peace in the stillness of the night. God's guidance is the star that leads me through the darkness. Every act of love is a letter to God, sealed with sincerity. I have seen God's hand in the miracles of everyday life. God's truth is the light that dispels my shadows. In the silence of prayer, I hear God's voice. I confess my weaknesses to God, and He fills me with strength. God's love is the song that my heart sings. Every sunrise is a message from God, reminding me of His presence. I have found God's wisdom in the simplicity of nature. God's grace is the balm that heals my wounds. In the quiet moments of reflection, I feel God's presence. Every heartbeat is a reminder of God's gift of life. I have seen God's beauty in the world around me. God's love is the light that guides my way. In times of sorrow, I find comfort in God's embrace. I confess my fears to God, and He fills me with peace. God's wisdom is the light that leads me through the dark. Every act of forgiveness is a reflection of God's mercy. I have felt God's presence in the silence of the night. God's love is the foundation of my life. In the beauty of nature, I see God's handiwork. Every moment of joy is a gift from God. I confess my doubts to God, and He fills me with faith. God's grace is the light that guides my path. In the stillness of the morning, I hear God's whisper. Every act of kindness is a reflection of God's love. I have felt God's peace in the midst of chaos.